What's up? Welcome back to Bold Business. I'm your host, Philip Michael, and let's get right to this week's trends. Now, across America, people are arguing whether we should raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Keep in mind, the federal minimum wage is currently $7.25 an hour, which most agree is not a living wage in any part of the country. But while people were fighting, Costco stepped in and one-upped everybody, raising their minimum wage to $16 an hour. Now, Costco is the second biggest retailer in the country with over 180,000 employees, and starting next week, the lowest paid employee will get $16 an hour. They beat out the federal government for one, as well as Target and Amazon, who both pay a $15 minimum, and Walmart, who pays an $11 minimum wage. Side note, Costco's co-founder is also famous for refusing to raise the price of his hot dogs from $1, even with inflation. So the question is, can other businesses follow in their footsteps? Well, that's the million-dollar question, no pun intended. Now, with everything that's happening, and according to some statistic, with the stimulus checks and everything that's happened since over the past year, it's a situation where 1 out of every $5 that are in circulation right now, 1 out of every 5 was printed in the last year, according to some statistics. Let's say the veracity isn't there, but let's just say that it is. If that's the case, you'll start to see that the buying power of the dollar will diminish. That is inflation. You see signs of it everywhere right now. You see the stock market booming. You see everything booming. That's that right there. So, of course, if there's inflation, you have to adjust the salaries for one. Number two, with people's finances being in shambles over the past year, it's important that people get an extra boost to get ahead once things return to normal. So I think it's a great move by Costco. Kudos to you. And it's a good thing to see the big giants are, doing the same thing, raising the minimum wage, because, again, it's very important to note this and know this. The buying power of the dollar is not the same in 2 years that it will be today, just simply because of the natural function of how money works. More money in supply, the buying power of each dollar will then go down. Next, Twitter announced their first major change to the platform since the introduction of Fleets, which is basically a ripoff of Instagram Stories, which in itself was a ripoff of Snapchat. Now, Twitter is copying more platforms by letting users charge their followers for exclusive content. Subscribers would be called super followers, and they'd pay for extra treats to join a group or get a little badge on their account. Now, groups are the other new feature. They're pretty much like Facebook groups, so you can join a cat lovers group where you all just talk about cats all the time, or a money group to share ideas about saving and growing your money. Because you have money Twitter, boxing Twitter, football Twitter, these Twitter communities. This is where you can collect them together and it can be monetized. Now, some users are upset with this idea of paying for tweets. RIP Twitter was even trending on Twitter after it was announced. Now, there is no release date yet for these new features, but in a crowded social space, maybe the app has to shake things up just a little bit. Now, you always want to be in the forefront of innovation, and one of the critical things to see here is that there's been this argument, this debate, whether, especially on the heels of the election, whether these social media platforms are publishers. Do they have a responsibility to uphold journalistic standards? And then they went in there and had fact checkers. There's all these things. So these things are constantly evolving. Now, there's also been pressure because people are starting to view these social media platforms more as publishers, that the content creators that drive traffic and eyeballs to the individual accounts that live on the platform, that they should have a way to monetize what it is that they do, basically paying the creators. TikTok has been doing that, recruiting people from different platforms to get them on there and creating compensation packages for these creators. Instagram is starting to do it too, having badges where people can donate to you, shops, things of that nature. So it's not surprising that Twitter will come into the game with this particular initiative. Now, from my vantage point, and this is just my 2 cents, I have no inside information, this is just based on what I see, it could appear that Twitter is simply throwing out the idea of a premium service that allows content creators to charge for their content. And let's face it, they don't have the same type of dynamic interface from the standpoint of visuals and, let's say, like Instagram. So they have to find a way to do it. Now, the problem rather becomes, do people really want to pay for tweets? I don't think so. I think it's the extension of the same issue of you've been conditioned to not pay for news. You get the free papers. You can go on Twitter and find the news. So are you really going to go to that source and expect these people to pay for it, and do you expect people will want to? And I think this may be why they put it out there, just to see how the public would react. So sometimes this is the way that you do it. You get the initial reaction before you actually roll it out. Will it be rolled out? Who really knows? And even if they do, will people adopt it and pay for tweets? That remains to be seen. But it is an interesting initiative if this does, in fact, go through. Next, 9-time NBA All-Star Russell Westbrook is officially in the investment game. He's partnered with Varo Bank, which is America's first all-virtual bank, as an investor and advisor. His goal is to finance minority-owned companies that are usually ignored by traditional banks and bridge that financial gap. So Westbrook's company actually led the investment round of $63 million. Now, this is actually really, really interesting because I don't know if you guys remembered a few years back, ESPN put out this 30 for 30 documentary called Broke, which highlighted how 90% of all athletes that make millions upon millions of dollars go broke almost immediately after retiring. On the heels of that, and on the heels of a lot of the prominent rap moguls, entertainers, actors, people that are very, very liquid in the business that they're in, are starting to put their money to work. Jay-Z, for instance, just sold out his liquor brand. Was it $250 million? People are becoming more money conscious. You had 50 Cent years ago, who actually was one of the first ones to actually do this. Instead of taking an endorsement check, he took a piece of equity, it sold to Coca-Cola, I believe, and he then pocketed. The reports have been as high as $100 million, although that is obviously subject to confidentiality clauses. But that is what the rumor says. Now, in this case, there are a lot more athletes that are then becoming money conscious, that are going into the VC tech space to invest. You have Kevin Durant, you have Serena Williams, you have really prominent people that are doing that, and they're setting the trend. And I think it's actually an excellent, excellent manifestation of athletes that have a limited window, not only to make money, but where they're quote unquote hot and they're relevant in the public's eye, because once they retire 20 years from now, no one really tends to care because there's a new generation of players there. So he's capitalizing on his fame, his capital, his current standing, and it actually helps one of those startups that are advanced enough to where they can command the type of partnership, because it legitimizes them and it basically taps into his fan base, Westbrook's that is, and again gives them a direct pathway to his fan base, which is their ideal end user, demographically speaking. So I think it's an excellent move. Congrats to Russell Westbrook, and congrats to Varo Bank. I'm excited to see where this goes, and it could be a template for other deals to be made in the future with financial systems and services and things of that nature.